Hi, this is Lynn Porter, and thanks for joining me to find out a little bit about the background and understanding of core issues and what they're about. Now, very simply, the core issues are that stuff which you hold on to, which is the core of that which is you. So, to make that a little bit more simple, I've put it together as a little pathway diagram, and hopefully you'll get an aha moment at the end of that as you understand how it all works. Now, we all experience traumas at some point in our lives, and dramas or even misperceptions, and they can be the innocent misperceptions of childhood when we don't have the development and understanding to understand what's going on. But basically, when the situation happens to us, we end up facing a time bomb, in effect. Now, we translate that experience via our senses, the senses of touch, of smell, of sight, of hearing, and of taste. And all of those sensory experiences put everything together and transmit it to us via nerve pathways, nerve transmissions, one nerve sending signals to another in the brain. And those pathways are called neural nets. And what they do is create a mind map for us, and it's a mind map of recognition that gets filed away in the mind brain filing cabinet under something called survival. And it knows that whenever we experience something that's similar to this again, we can survive it if we do the same thing. And what happens is that very often it becomes a negative program that will run and rerun every time we encounter anything like that original experience again. So, where is all this data stored? Well, it's actually in each and every cell of our body. And as we know, those cells are constantly renewing themselves and passing on that information that's stored in them from one generation of cells to the next. So, each little cell is greater, far greater than the greatest quantum computer that we can imagine. So all the data then around that experience gets stored in our cellular memory, and just like data in a computer, that gets triggered by anything that reminds us coming in via the senses of that original experience. And it is this data, this information, that is known as a core issue. So I hope that's cleared that up a bit. The core issues obviously are time bombs, because there they sit waiting to go off again when they are triggered. And that is exactly what happens, because when we account something that's similar in some way to what went on in the first place, then just like that computer, it's programmed in there, it's stored in there, and the program will pick it up. And that program will then rerun, that pulls up the original data and we recreate the same old original stress. And even our senses react to that, and it reaffirms the old experience once more and entrenches it a little bit more. Okay, so what that does is affect our emotional state, and it's our emotional state that defines our behaviour. And it's interesting at this point to note that 95% of our behaviours are triggered by subconscious programs and subconscious experiences that we aren't even aware of. And of course, it's those that actually mask our potential and stop us from being who we are. Now, those of you who've been trying the Bachflower remedies, which work with our emotional states, clear the emotions, turn the negative ones into positive, may have found that after a while it goes full circle and some of those same old remedies start to come back up again. Now, the reason for this is often that there is some initial trauma in there that all these emotions hang round and that are being triggered. And when that happens, this is where we look at introducing the core issue formulas as part of the HEP program. Now, our physical, that's our physical body, and our mental body, which is the way we think, it's our mindset, the emotional, our feeling, our spiritual, which is our overself, our higher self that guides us along the way. All these are interlinked and flow in and amongst each other. But when people experience some trauma or shock and they are deeply hurt, if they don't get some healing or support at that level, they may well go on to manifest physical symptoms, can be of illness and disease, even fall degenerately ill. So the core issue formulas have been developed over a number of years around a very simple flower essence system. Now, the flower essences are based on the same safe and simple approach that was developed in the 1930s by Dr. Batch to deal with our emotions with the Batch flower remedies. Now, the core issue formulas is a system that is extended and expanded upon this to go another layer in, and it deals with 10 archetypal core issues. And these core issues can sometimes be projected from one generation to the next. Very often, and you might recognize this in your own families, certainly in families I've worked with, you will see that experiences can be transmitted on a similar level from one generation to the next. And that's really, really interesting, isn't it? Because it's not just like the colour of hair or the colour of eyes or whatever that's passed on, but it's also coincidental attraction of these experiences, and it's this that I refer to as spiritual DNA. These are the core issues that are held in each cell and form that anchor point for life experiences which can create those emotional and behavioural trigger points that I'm talking about. Now, how they're produced? Well, very, very simply, they are in crystal glasses with very pure mineral water in, where you put in the plant material and it's steeped in that water for 24 hours over sunlight and throughout moonlight. Now, water has the ability to hold memory. So after 24 hours, what we do is strain through that water, discard the plant material and mix it 50-50 with vodka. And the vodka acts as a preservative, and that is what makes something called the mother tincture. Now, we take the mother tincture and we can test that with people who are presenting these symptoms, and we can see them strengthen on us, and we know that they are validated remedies at this point. And those validated remedies are what are then put through a homeopathic remedy making machine. And how we do that is that it works a little bit like photocopiers. We buy in some little tiny sugar balls from a homeopathic supplier, and those sugar balls go into this remedy maker, and the information from the original mother tincture is transmitted across onto the little miniature sugar balls, and they're held in there in the sugar molecule. That information is held like it's in a safe. It's in a safe place, and it's locked in there until that pilule, that little ball, is put into water, and then it's released again. So we'll look at that in a few minutes when we move on to how to prepare the remedies. But now let's look at how this actually works. I've talked about the cells holding on to the memory. What happens is these cellular core issue remedies go in and release those cellular memories, and it works a little bit like, you know, that white fluid that we put on paper to blot out the mistakes, to cover those up. We call it Tipp-Ex. Well, if you can imagine a photocopy and somebody's written notes on that, and some of those notes are incorrect, they contain inaccurate information. If we put that master copy with all those notes on in a photocopier, then all the copies coming out will hold that taint. They will have that inaccurate information on. If we use that material to Tipp-Ex it all out so it's clear again, and we just go back to the original correct information, then what will happen if that's photocopied is there will all be clean copies coming out. So you're getting the idea here of how we can actually clear the cells of the original trauma and the original incorrect and inaccurate information. The body retains this cellular memory, and recent studies show that that can be held in the heart, which is a little bit like a hard disk in a computer, which is then projected with holographic lasers onto each cell, and as we know, each cell replicates itself, regenerates itself. So what the core issue system does is to address and help to restore the balance in this process. Let's now look at what the core issues do. Let's look first of all at core issue 1, which is about balance and clearing. Okay, this is about the right, physically it's about the right and the left brain balance and the liver. It's about balancing the masculine and the feminine. It's about the past and the present. unresolved core issues that come from mother and father and get projected onto the wounded child. Mum and dad have core issues, they project them on each other, that creates the dynamic, and it's the dynamic in which the child grows up that puts the foundations in place for those early core issues that get reaffirmed throughout the life experience. It also balances the intuitive and the rational aspects of oneself, and it's about bridging where the past is impacting on the present so that one can move on, and one can move on from those deeply ingrained and sometimes hurtful experiences of childhood that we don't understand but which subconsciously hold us back through life. Core issue 2 is about being in the flow, and this remedy is all about circulation. It involves flow and also being in the flow. Now, this remedy will impact again on the mental and the physical and the emotional aspects of life. When these are all aligned and flowing into each other, then no surprise really, is it, that life flows a lot better. The blockages are removed. Now, when this flow happens, it affects our confidence. It gives us that quiet confidence of, I could do this, I am doing this. And it gets us moving into the flow of achievement and self-fulfillment. Again, it's about getting the left and right brain working together, and again, balancing the parental projections that have been ingrained as core issues since childhood. It's particularly helpful in autism, and autism is about that bridge across the centre of the two halves of the brain, something called the corpus callosum. It's where the two halves of the brain connect. But sometimes in the case of autism, there is a misfiring across this bridge, and so a misalignment creates only a minimal connection in some places. The remedy then assists in bringing the both lobes to work together, and this brings into balance the parallel dimensions which fragment those who are not fully engaged in the here and now. Now, in these clients, there could be a frustration where things are neither one way nor the other. So it presents a kind of self-frustration. It's also about responsibility, and by that I mean the ability to respond, accepting that it's okay to do certain things and that they are not held back as a burden, a responsibility. Okay? And in this way it helps with rigid thinking patterns and fixed or rigid or obsessive patterns of behaviour in certain situations, which are sometimes the symptoms presented by people on the autistic spectrum disorder. So it actually helps to break through the barriers, the rigid barriers, and start to get things flowing once more like it should. Core issue 3 is about finding your feet, and it's this remedy that enables the client to be able to stand up for themselves in an appropriate way. So it's about assertiveness and not aggressiveness, which is sometimes the way it comes over with people, young people with ADHD or autistic type symptoms. The remedy balances the frontal lobe of the brain, but it also balances the sacrum and the feet. So it helps those who are not sure about what they're doing. So in this respect, it enables them to stand in their space appropriately, not necessarily stand in their ground. This is much more empowered. It's an assertiveness, that feeling that I just am. It's not a vicious response to situations. It's an empowered feeling that can be physically felt coming up through their legs. It's helpful in situations sometimes where children cower. So this is about bringing them up. It's also about compassion. Core issue 4 is the core issue for acceptance, and this remedy works physically with supporting the heart and the emotional system and the eyes. It addresses sadness, and it's the balance of the impact of accepting that not everything can be happy all the time. There can be sad bits, but that it's okay. So this remedy supports acceptance and acknowledgement, and it allows the client to be quiet with that feeling of acceptance and calm, like mum holding you and saying it's okay to cry. So it addresses those issues to held on to around painful and tearful emotions. Core issue 5 is the formula for connection. And this remedy assists and again supports the brain, the cerebellum. It's helpful too in supporting the movement and coordination. It's about being able to move more freely, but it can also help clients to calm down as well. And in this respect, the remedy is able to help both ends of the scale. It supports sensory connections and it assists the peripheral nerves, reacting especially to touch. And in this respect, can help clients in recognizing touch. So it will assist in cases of uncoordinated movement, for example, like dyspraxia or hyperactivity, for example. It's about connection. Okay, so now we look at core issue 6, which is about harmony. And this remedy also supports brain function and focuses on areas of the pons and the medulla and the brain center. It also supports the thalamus and it harmonizes basic instincts. It can too support brain injury, especially around birth or where there has been assault or physical abuse around the head. The remedy supports the effects of this going down the spine as well. So where the flow has been interrupted, this remedy changes that and puts the flow back again. Core issue 7 is about support. And again, on a physical level, this remedy supports the lungs, the bronchial tubes, and the respiratory system. Now, where there is a rise, which we're seeing these days in respiratory and allergic reactions like asthma, this can sometimes represent as a counteraction to the ozone layer, which some people might not find tolerable. The remedy also assists in balancing carbon dioxide and oxygen, dissolved gases in the blood, which along with other gases, this remedy can provide support with balancing them. What can happen is that the dissolved gases in the blood can have a detrimental effect on brain tissue if they overload and they're out of balance. For example, ammonia. This will also affect the psychology and the emotions. Now the remedy works well with the sinuses and with air pockets around the skull and the brain. It doesn't work with supporting specific emotions, and if you need that, you need to go back to the Bach flower remedies to find out which emotion needs support and to use the relevant Bach flower remedy for this. But what the core issue formula does is link with panic attacks. And these are often associated predominantly with gases in the body being out of balance, often through hyperventilation. So it can be very useful in those situations. Core issue 8 is for ADHD or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or even ADD, attention deficit disorder. And this remedy supports those levels of hyperactive behaviour which are where the cycles of the brain per second, things called the brain waves, are very high and out of synchronization, and this can cause the person with this condition to be out of balance with everything going on around them. It causes them to be lacking in concentration, often unable to finish tasks and to settle down, and also too often affects their sleep patterns. So this remedy can help to align what's called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic aspects of the autonomic nervous system, so creating a balance in the subconscious operating of the physical aspects of the body, which are linked with psychological performance of the individual through their behaviour. And here we have a picture of the actual plant, quite a rare one, which has been used to create this particular core issue formula. Very often this can fit in, this particular remedy, with another core issue remedy. Sometimes two are indicated. Now core issue 9 is the one for autism, to support autism. And as mentioned earlier with core issue 2 formula, this condition is about failure of certain connections within the inner and physical self that fail to fully connect the interaction between the inner and the outer worlds. So the symptoms can manifest as habitual behaviours, lack of interaction with the present environment and situation, and fixations and ritualised routines, as well as resistance to changing situations. There can also be certain sensitivities to external stimulus, for example, touch or colour or taste, etc. And this can very often be a hypersensitive behaviour in those situations where they can be completely overwhelmed, like in a busy, noisy classroom, for example. And this is the plant, like the two hemispheres of the brain, that has been out of alignment, that has been used to create this formula. Core issue 10 is about self-worth, and one that affects a lot of people. This formula is about finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and as we know, many people go on this quest throughout their life journey, looking constantly outside of themselves. In fact, it starts with finding the relationship with yourself, and that involves looking inside. So really, that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is found in the heart, in accepting and loving oneself. And when that sense of self-value and self-worth is found, it can open the floodgates to financial abundance and any other form of abundance as well. Because we all have issues connected with money that stem from our parents at some point. And depending on that developmental age, we can feel it's all our fault that our parents have argued or whatever, or controlled over money. And that will embed a program of low self-worth as a core issue, which can then manifest as lack in later on in life. So core issue 10. Remedy for self-worth. Now, the remedies can be used in two ways. They can be used on an introductory level, which is where there are specific or potential problems which are already apparent, and you may be able to identify those through the core issue formula definitions that we've got. Although they could be used at earlier stages to start unravelling the physiological trauma holding the emotional problems. So if you think about this, if they've just, or if a young person has just had this experience, by taking the remedies now, it means it can prevent things from happening in the future. It can also be used on a physical level to help to support long-term degenerative problems. So really they are appropriate at any time. Sometimes we might not be able to understand why we've chosen the ones that we have, because they are so deeply ingrained in the subconscious. And as I say, 95% of subconscious programming and data we are just not aware of, we don't know. So how do you find out which remedy you need? Well, it's really quite simple, and you can work it out from a very simple muscle testing technique which is available to watch on the HET video presentation. And it really is as straightforward as that. There's Alan and I demonstrating on this little film how this particular process works. It works on the basis that what is good for us strengthens us, what is not good for us weakens us. So by working out a normal strength from the muscle test and touching each remedy in turn, we can work out which one it is that strengthens us most, and that in fact is the one that we need. So from this point it's possible to work out the dose and the duration of the treatment program, and that's all covered in the accompanying video and explained in your ebook that goes along with this presentation. So when you have found out which remedy is the one to take, and sometimes I said earlier you may indicate that you need two remedies which complement each other in some way. Very rarely would you take more than two. So it's the two that strengthen you the most, but in most cases it will just be the one. When you have checked what the remedy is for, it should make sense to you or the person concerned why that one has been chosen, and you'll be able to see some of that ingrained data that's been held onto. If you can't understand it, it doesn't mean it's the wrong one. It just means that a lot of this is held onto on a subconscious level. Now, when you take this, it's very different to taking the batch flower remedies, where you actually feel differently. You feel the positive emotion and you create a different outcome because you feel differently. With the core issue formulas, it goes deeper than that. It doesn't involve feelings, but you know that something has changed within you. And I describe this in the ebook. It's a little bit like walking with a crutch for years and years and years and having that taken away from you, and suddenly you're starting to walk in a different way, in a more positive and powerful way. So it's that kind of knowing that something's different, something has changed. and you will get that feeling. And I talk more about that in the ebook. So how you make the remedies then? Well, you'll need a small, a 10ml if you can get one, amber dropper bottle, which you can get from chemist shops or health shops. Add a third of a bottle of vodka, so fill it a third of the way up with vodka, and that's in there as a preservative. And then add the other 2/3 of the bottle, top it up with fresh mineral water. And then you add one of those homeopathically prepared little sugar balls that I talked about from the Core Remedy selection bottle, and allow it to dissolve in the liquid. Now, at this point, and I mention this on the film, you do need to be careful because it's important not to actually touch the sugar ball. If you do, it's a bit like touching a photograph that's just come off the printer, and the ink will smart and you'll lose the impression. This is what happens if you touch that. Remember me saying it starts to dissolve in water? Well, you've got moisture on the skin, so you will de-energize it and you will lose the effectiveness. So either just tip it into the lid of the little bottle and then tip it up, or put it onto a spoon and put it straight into the prepared remedy bottle, then put the top on it and start to shake it so it dissolves. And when it dissolves, it's releasing that information into the liquid in the bottle. Remember to write out a label and put it on it with the dosage and the duration of the treatment on it. So it's very simple, very straightforward, and you can work out uniquely for the individual concerned what it is they need to take and when. So any queries or any comments that you've got on the core issue formulas, please get in touch with us on www.hetwebsite.com. You can email me directly, which is Lynn, Lin, at hetwebsite.com, and please keep us updated with the progress that you make on these remedies. And as I say, any further information that you need, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Enjoy taking the remedies, they're fun. Enjoy finding out which ones they are. Keep us posted.